Hi there, we're now in May and I feel that's a perfect time to paint some asparagus. So what I have here is my iPad and I want to give my asparagus a little bit the feeling like Adriaan Korte did many centuries ago. So I took a picture of some asparagus, some fresh asparagus in my kitchen because the sun was shining in just at the right way. But what I don't like is the background, of course. So I want to dramatize it a bit. So what I did on my iPad, I created a new layer where I just added some black and make my asparagus a bit more dramatic. So let's get started. How are we going to paint this? First of all, what I've done is I've prepared my panel. This is a mus panel. It's an MDF panel coated with one layer of gesso just to get some extra tooth to it and some texture. Then I went over it with a very light wash of acrylic paint in burnt sienna for that warm glow. Then I added some dots on 5 centimeter intervals, and I have a similar grid like that on my iPad, so then I could easily sketch very roughly my asparagus in. And for the initial sketch, I use the white Pit pastel pencil. It doesn't muddy my paint, and as the asparagus are white, I used white, so the colors are already a little bit in place and it will not get muddy. What do we need, or what do I need? I have here titanium white. Next to that, a little bit of cadmium yellow. That will be for the brightest part here, as you see also on the reference. I have yellow ochre to create some muted tones. I have burnt umber, because I think we can really, raw umber, because I think we can really use that very well in the shadow areas of the asparagus. It has a slightly greenish tone to it, I feel. And if we mix that with white, we might have a beautiful asparagus color there. Then I have ultramarine blue. And ultimately, I squeezed out the last bit of black for the background. I also like to mix my blacks myself. I will probably do a little bit of that with my ultramarine blue and raw umber. But as the ivory black is covering a lot better than these transparent colors, I also put it on there for my background because, again, I want it to be a bit dramatic. The brushes I use, actually I'm planning to use these 3. I have a very small filbert from the brand brush, Mus brush, it's the same as the panel. I have a flat, which is for the bigger lines, and I have another filbert which is also a bit soft if I want to get a little bit more less streaky strokes. But first, let's start with our palette knife by mixing some colors. Now there's a lot of white in these asparagus, and I think it's very important that early on in the painting we will already establish a bit of the darker values around it to better judge our colors. Now first I will start with a basic asparagus color. Now let's just see what happens when we take a tiny bit of that raw umber mixed with white. You see you get a little bit of a greenish tone to it. That's actually already a pretty nice value, which I'm gonna keep here. We might want to darken it later on more. That's fine. Just gonna do a few variations of that mixture. There we have a little bit darker. And actually what I might also put on there is some, let's see, some burnt umber, which is a bit more of a brown toned earth color. Not too much, just a little bit. And I'll show you here what that does. It makes a warmer, oh, it's a bit like a gray, right? Makes a warmer tone. Then also make a variety with some more yellows in it. I'm taking as a base the yellow ochre. Again, just adding white. But it's too strong. We want it a bit more thinned down. I will use a bit of that burnt umber here, because burnt umber is kind of like the darkest part of a yellow. That creates a nice warm tone. As you can see, the raw umber is more cool, the burnt umber is more warm. So it's also a nice way to play with your color temperatures in your painting. We have some very bright spots here, but I think for now we don't need to overcomplicate things yet. I also want some darker values for the shadows, and actually I'm using some of that burnt umber and ultramarine blue in this case, which creates a near black color. And the more you play around with variations towards the brown side or the blue side, you get different outcomes. I'm just making like a little, two different mixtures, a bit more to the bluish black and a bit more the brown one. Now for the board itself, I think a nice mixture will be a bit of that. Oh, this is a bit of ultramarine blue that sneaked in there, but hey. On my asparagus I also see a bluish tone, so as Bob Ross used to say, we'll call that a happy little accident. Taking some more white, because I also want a bit more of a neutral color. And I'm adding again a little bit of burnt umber, because I think for the board on which the asparagus lay, we might get there with a mixture of white and burnt umber. Needs more white because it's very light. That might do the trick. Now we have some colors on there now, so that's a nice moment to actually start painting. And for the start, I'll just like to use my biggest brush, the flat one, to gel in some first initial colors. I'll just start with some of this raw umber. I'm not using any mediums, just making a very thin application with my brush to get some initial shadow shapes in there. So here we're just basically finding the shapes and refining our sketch, because this sketch is by no means detailed. But let's get some shapes in there. This will all be painted over again at a later stage. So I'm doing it very, very thinly. Just rubbing it out. And it doesn't need to be an exact copy of what we see on a reference. You know, that's the freedom you always have as an artist. Give it your own twist. Don't be a slave to your reference, but paint what you need and what you want. Now this shadow, it starts quite warm. We need to leave a little bit of space in there because we also see some light popping through there. But I do love these contrasts that it brings. The lights and the darks. I'm a big fan of asparagus, especially with some ham and egg. So when the season started and I saw them in the shops, I thought like, hey, I need to eat you guys. And then when I was about to peel them and I saw this light coming in through the kitchen window, I thought, okay, I see a painting there. I see a painting there. I want to paint this. And I think those are the you know, the nicest subjects you can do. Are the ones you really feel attracted by the moment you see it. The moment when that light hits your subject just right. Now when you're painting from life, that's of course not always that maintainable. And when I saw it, I also didn't have time to paint. So I snapped a picture. You see, I'm really rubbing it out here. Huh? I'm being quite rough on this brush also. You see that here I'm working a bit with that more bluish variety of this near black color. But by rubbing it out, I also put the paint deeper into the panel. There we go. And that background we wanted to do black, so let's already get a little bit of black in. Just very light again, just to get the rough indications, the rough shapes. And as long as we stay thin, it's easy to paint over later on. So here this one is kind of sticking out. Smoothing out this line a little bit. Here I also want to show that these are two different ones and it's not just one big surface. So here I'm really almost sculpting. It's I think you could compare it to sculpting. Finding our shapes and approach. It's also a great way to explore your subject like this. You get to know it a bit. I think here I will put like a horizon line right about there. Also this side. So there you have the foreground blending later on with the black background. So, and then also here, that edge of the table. Just to provide ourselves a bit more context for when we are moving on to actually loading that brush with paint. Let's continue with our asparagus itself. I'm just, rubbing my brush in a paper tissue, which I keep in my left hand. And now we can start with the fun part. I'm looking at my asparagus, and I'll start again with a bit of a darker tone here. And I'm starting here a bit with that middle asparagus because I see quite some contrast there. So I think that's a relatively easy entry point to the asparagus. Then we see that it shifts a bit the value. It could suffice maybe even with some of that burnt or raw umber here. And then it's getting a bit lighter, so I'm taking a bit of that lighter white mixture is a bit too light still, so I'm adding it to the burnt umber, the raw umber, which is on there. This color looks reasonably okay. Then if we compare this shadow to the one of this asparagus, we see that this one is a lot lighter. That's because it's like a bit reflected light. I'm not starting with my lightest value, I'm starting again with a, like in between one. Actually, maybe with this one a bit. Just jotting down those shapes. Again, lightly. You see that warmth from that underlayer shines through. And I would like to keep some of that warm underlayer peeping through in the whole piece, by the way. Now here it's getting more and more dark. Let's see what happens if we do some raw and burnt umber mixed with each other. Seems to be a nice combo. These are two transparent colors, so they will always be very soft. And I see this asparagus is a bit more yellow brownish. Also adding more of that color in my mixture for this one. You have also this typical asparagus shapes. Try not to lose those out of sight. Color I'm working with now would also work well at the bottom of this top asparagus, like that. And I'm going back to my raw umber, a little bit of that mixture, just making it a bit more dark, and putting it on this asparagus. Still very, very thin. Just giving indications of texture. You know, the funny thing, it kind of actually looks a bit bluish if you see it on there, compared to all the colors that surround it. And that's the beauty also of painting and colors. It's the colors, they're always relative to one another, you know? Here a bit more brownish again. Play around with warm and cool. Try to get the hang of that as you go. And I feel to lighten this a bit. Maybe add a touch of yellow. This one, it's also not fully in the light, just a little tip. Doesn't really look like asparagus yet now, does it? No worries, that will come. I'm going to introduce some more lights, and I'm not using pure white here, because I always want to keep that option till the very, very end. Because you cannot go whiter than that. If you already put that in at the beginning and you say, well, actually another part I want to have a little bit more light or white, yeah, then I'm afraid, my friend, it's too late. Or you need to darken everything else in your piece. No. Doesn't sound like an ideal situation. No. For this one, let's add some of this light value. Keeping it a bit vague at the end to also create a bit of a sense of depth. And by putting that on there, I also see like, hey, we need to darken the body of this one. As you go, you discover these kind of details that you need to darken. Again, it's kind of like sculpting. Adding paint, removing paint, pushing it around. Until you get to something that you're pleased enough with. But I think later on we'll do a lot of work with that smaller brush. But that's for later. No, it's actually since not too long ago that I really fell in love with these earth tones like burnt and raw umber. And I think they are very versatile. They're easy to mix into other colors as well. And they offer you a lot of possibilities. Let's add a bit more brighter colors here, because we see that also on the reference. Trying to follow a bit the shape I see. It also keeps your work playful and dynamic. Here it's a bit like almost a purple shade, so this goes very well for that pinkish. Slowly but surely, we're starting to see asparagus appear. And if it's for you a bit too slowly, then just skip ahead in the video and rewind if you feel like, hey, I missed a certain point. How did he do that? Just watch that back. No, that's everybody paints at their own pace, in their own way. But do not feel obliged to watch the whole process. And if you do, if you're here for the whole ride, I'd also enjoy that. I'd love to hear that. Yeah, if you watch this whole piece come together, and if it helped you in any way. light. And on the other side, we have a bit more of the warmth, the glow. I'm saving my yellow really for later on. I always like to work with a bit of a limited palette. As you see here also, I don't have that many colors on there. You can create the nicest hues and color shifts and keeping a harmonious piece while doing so. Let me already add some of that light here indeed. That will help us in seeing the piece come together. Now I have a basic blocking. What I'm going to continue with is putting in more colors in the background. So as we remember, this was meant for the board. Put that board in to create an overall feeling of the colors. And also here you see, the more I spread it out, the warmer it gets. See that? Because the under layer shines through, and that's that warm burnt sienna. So again, here I'm starting thin in the knowledge that I can always add more thicker layers on top if I want to. The other way around doesn't really work. Well, at least not when you're doing oils in alla prima. Alla prima means in one go. So this, or one layer. This painting from start to finish is done in one sitting. The fact that it's alla prima, and if you finish your piece later on, you feel like, hey, the next day, you feel like, hey, I kind of want to adjust something, feel the liberty to do so. Again, it's your painting. You decide when it's done. Let's get some black on that background. Also, I'm not putting this in very thickly, but just thick enough. Not rubbing it out as much as I did before. But you can already see how those asparagus are starting to pop out by adding this black contrasting background. Now well, you saw when at the beginning maybe that I squeezed out my black tube. Recently on bigger paintings I use quite some black in the backgrounds. I like to do that because it really makes your painting pop. Or at least your subject, makes your subject pop out. And it's always easier to have a background in only one color and not a gradient, for example. If you're short on time, choose a nice subject that might pop with black as a background. Yeah, with those bigger paintings, you're easily painting 1 hour only a black abyss. Further detailing when I get closer to my asparagus I will do later on with a smaller brush. And here I wanted those to meet, right? So I'm just kind of blending a bit of this color with my black. Brush, maybe adding a bit of this one. It's a middle tone. And just go lighter and lighter and lighter. You also see what white on black does. It gives this milky glow to it. I really like that personally. It really looks like it's glowing. Just getting a new tissue. And now I'm moving on to a smaller brush. My mesh brush. And now I think the fun part starts, because we can start detailing a bit, getting the colors to where we want them to be. Now this brush is not that easy to mix all colors on there, so I'm really relying on my palette knife for that. Let's see, which one am I going to pick first? I think then this one, because it's quite dark. I do want, again, to have more of that burnt umber. I didn't expect to, at the beginning I didn't expect I would use that one this much actually, but as we can see, it is a color that comes in quite handy. Here I'm just mixing it with the raw umber as well, to have it a bit more neutralized. And these are transparent colors, so I'm applying them a bit more thickly to get a bit more the colors in there which I want. These are very easily to spread out, but then you lose a lot of that darkness. So here I'm using that same color, but just spreading it more out. And I noticed that here it's also slightly bluish. So I'm going to take a bit of that blue, mixing it a bit with this blue. Starting small, see what happens when we put it on there. And then we see actually it's not that bad. So that's good. Then we can continue on that road. Here's also a bit more blue. Also, if you don't want a too strong blue, you can always mix a bit of white with black, with ivory black. You also create a bit of blue, but then a bit muted blue. Same color I can actually reuse here. Here we also want to have a sharp edge later on, a sharp contrast. And it's defining the shape also of this asparagus that lays a bit more in front. No worries, this part I will fix later on when I go over it again. Now it's just about getting that darkness down. Same with this one. Because with this shadow work, with the shadow play, we can really add depth. Three-dimensionality. As mentioned before, it doesn't need to be an exact copy of the asparagus as you see them in your painting. So don't stress too much about each little individual brushstroke. Instead, just try to have fun when you're painting, and paint for yourself and not for others or for likes. Just for yourself. These asparagus are not even all over them, huh? So it's also something that I need to keep in mind when I'm drawing edges like this. It's not too perfect. It's a product of nature, right? putting in some boulder shapes here, boulder strokes. Again, we want to have a lively piece. They call it a still life, but it doesn't need to be that still, right? I think there, in that really dark spots, I will also put pure black. And then I will also add some of that brown to that black to make it a bit more warm. Now we're gradually rubbing it out just by adding some brown to it. And then I go over it again on the edge itself to make it a bit more smooth, because it's a rounded object. There's not that straight line. Yeah, that might work. Let me add a bit more darker colors here on that tip. And here a bit lighter, touch lighter. For that, I don't know what it is, leaf on the peel, no clue. Maybe some of this bluish hue to create some interesting lightful. Trying to keep it organic where I can. Maybe some more of this tone also. That's the raw umber. Adding some more random shapes. These perfect imperfections of the vegetable. Now let's move on to the next one, and I think for that I would go to this one. Also again, so a bit more dark. Also get some of that light in there of that table. I also would need to place it here. See if we want to tweak that later on or not. For the shadow, I will not start with black straight away, but more with a brownish black. And connecting these shapes a bit with each other. Here I'm just blending it a bit by rubbing it out. And I'm continuing with that on the asparagus itself, because it also has this quite dark edge, but I'm using more of a brown there instead, the burnt umber. Nice and warm. I think I need to create a more yellow light color. think. Well, it might do. Might do. Let's see. That's okay. It's nice to see how it also blends a bit. The parts where you don't want it too dominant. Rubbing it off. And blending it a bit. That same color I might be able to use on this one. This is tiny hair which fell off my brush and it doesn't want to come off. There we go. Away with you. A little bit of reflected light here. There we go. It tells me also that we need to have it more dark here. Here I'm blending a little bit of that lighter value in the background to play around with the shapes a bit. I think also I need to have a slightly reddish color. Also an earth tone, transparent oxide red. But I think that might be a nice addition to this palette. Just a little bit to make a bit warmer light values like here. See? You can feel that warm light of the late afternoon shining through. Also see that here, huh? On this one. And then when we get to this head, it's a bit more muted color, so we go back to our raw umber with a bit of white. Maybe a bit of this background color on here would also work. It's not that cool, not that warm, what I see, but a bit in between. Some blues also, right about there. The shadow of the asparagus that lies above. I must say, I find this a very fun subject to paint. There's so much going on, so much light, and it behaves in such different ways. You see so many colors. I want to blue this one up a bit. Push it a bit more to the background. Blue is a great color. Color might do nicely here as well. Yeah. Here I also see again that nice warm color shining through here as well. Here also a little bit. Here it's very yellow. Let's see if we can capture that also. And because it's all white, it also reflects like everywhere, right? Well, you're also on the bottom of this one. It really reflects a lot of light. This shadow needs to be darker. A bit too blue. Let's also put in some brown then. And this one is a bit of a warm brown. There. I think the head of this one can be a bit bigger. This one definitely also needs more attention. This one, that one, that one. Let's see what we can put in place for those. Now this is kind of getting a bit of a purple now. I like it. Gives us new opportunities. So let's start with this bottom a bit. Make it a nice purplish, let it slip off in the distance. Again here, they're rounded subjects. I don't want sharp edges there. Just gently brushing over it. Then that tip is quite dark. Get the shadow in. And then we have a bit more of a green shadow on that side. And a lot of light there, so we'll get to that in just a bit. We need some more darkness as well, making some of this cooler colors and adding also texture to this asparagus. There. Here also sticking something out. Try to keep it simple. Add some light. This needs to be darker here. More raw umber. And later on, I'll definitely need to add more light to it as well. See if we can also gently add some really dark points here without rubbing it out too much. It looks quite okay to me. Let me add some reflected light as well, like with the one below there. Trying not to overdo it. I think that's good. Now this blue, I feel it's still a bit too strong. That's why I'm darkening it slightly. I really want this one to be like the one blue one in between all the rest, right? Nicely in the shadow there. And here we have the lighter blue values. Okay. Let's do something about this one on the top. Again there, I see this really warm glow right about there. And it continues a little bit there, and also in the tip a bit. Not too much though. I'm going back to my raw umber. And lightening it up. To get some darker values in. Towards the end, I really want to keep it soft, because it's further away. And in the front, it can be more contrasting and more sharp. Let's see. What do we see? We see quite some yellows in that front side here. Also a touch of blue, but I don't want to go too blue. I'm going a bit more for that purplish approach then. Till now that worked quite well. There in the middle, it's a bit where all the colors meet. But it also gets more dark. So can we make a darker color maybe by having that brown and adding some of this blue? This dark blue. Maybe. Yeah. Keeping this soft though. See, like this darker part between the lightest part and the rest of the shape. Let's see what we can make of that. My palette knife. I'm going to work a bit on these whites. Let's see. Here we have a very yellow white. And just adding this quite thick on there, because if you add thicker paint, light colors, it will look even lighter when the actual light shines on your painting. Just following a bit the shape here. Here also. Definitely here. and looking for those organic shapes. If I want it more bright, I just go over it again. And again with a thicker layer. Make this one a bit more thicker because it looks a bit awkward otherwise. Well, maybe asparagus always look a bit awkward, but hey. This tip will make it more big. A bit of variation. I like how this is going, guys. I really like it. This is a bit too dark, I feel, so I'm just rubbing away a bit. Add some more suggestion of the form. I think it's due to the fact that I use the same color as the background, so I'm making it more brown actually, this tip, to not have it fully lost over there. Just one line here will do the trick for that one. And then a bit more darkness here and there. Great. More yellow. For this very glowy part here. Here I see a lot of yellow. and dappling it on. Also some reflections on this one. Maybe just a tiny bit here as well. Taking a bit of the blue hue. I feel here we can use some blue. Adding some white to it. Tip again, make a bit more prominent. More white. Following some of these perfect imperfections again. This is too strong. This one too. Here too. Before I really dive into the final highlights there, I do want to get that background a bit closing in on it. Just blending a little bit here to make it soft, that edge. And when we do that with wet paint, it also starts to glow a bit more. Get this lovely glow. Keeping this edge vague. That bit bluish asparagus. Same here. There. That's far away, deep, deep, deep down. Maybe also smoothing out these brush strokes a bit and let them blend a bit at the backside here. Yeah, that's nice. That is nice. A little bit more detailing of that shape. Later on I will do the rest of the background as well. Now it's just getting those endpoints. Need to be careful there when you're using black. You need to be very careful with the shapes you put, that it doesn't get muddy. Yeah, let's continue with these whites, and I think this is like the brightest one we actually got. So adding more white to it. Still keeping it a bit on the yellow side. White. Actually slightly going over that edge as well. Create a slightly glowing effect. Now I'm continuing at the back side with the blue, having that cool tone. Same thing there, slightly over the edge. Not really happy with the head yet. Now after every brush stroke I do now, I clean my brush, because it's also mixing a bit with that black in the background now. There's a bit of that warm red. Also. These darker colors. We're getting there. We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. Hang in there. To add some more texture to this one. I also have some yellow highlight here, bouncing off from those others. Not too bright because it's not a direct hit. Making it warmer here and there. This one still looks a bit odd to me. So maybe we need to make that tip a bit bigger. Some more definition. More highlights. Continue work on that edges. Here we need it darker too. Doing that with my burnt umber. Here it needs to be darker as well. Just define those shapes a bit better. Okay, now I'm taking my soft brush to continue with the background, and I think here is also really still some attention needed. I'm going to use some of that blue shadow mixture here. A bit too blue maybe. This one instead. A bit easier to spread it out. making that shadow line a bit more vague. I don't want too much focus on that shadow. Continuing with my black background. I'm using this soft brush because I can make smoother strokes, otherwise it will be a bit too distracting. And I don't want that. I want it to be smooth. Then it helps that I already did those outlines around the asparagus itself. So I can use this bigger brush to gently, oh, that is okay folks, no worries. Gently brush in those blacks. Now you see why I like black backgrounds a lot. It really lights up those asparagus. Adding some brown here in the mixture for the foreground. Brown and black. Here I'm not doing it as dark as the background. We just get this tabletop in there, or chopping board, or whatever you want it to be. Smoothing it out. Smoothing this transition out as well. And here as well. From light to dark. Then back over it again. until it feels about right. And that's about right to me, at least. I still think that table is too brownish, so I'm going over it again with this color we made in the beginning, the burnt umber with white, just to lighten it up a bit. This is where the light hits, so here's the brightest area actually. Let's continue it a little bit along here for some interesting contrast. There. I think I'm almost ready to call it done. Maybe just some final highlights. Where do I see the sharpest lights? Yeah, it would be about there. Some pure white. Also some variations, right? This one is quite forward to us. We can add a bit more detail, make this one the star of the show. What drags our viewers in at the first glance. There we go. This is as far as I'm going to take it. All that remains is to sign it. And I like to sign my works with a toothpick because I can just simply scratch my name in the wet paint. There we go. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask them. Happy painting!